All right, everybody. So we're going to get started. We've got the majority of the people who registered here, and anybody else that signs in, we'll just have to catch up as we go along. All right, welcome to the first of our webinars in the summer 2021 Virtual Tech Exchange series. We have a number of them that will be going on for the rest of the summer, the next 6-7 weeks. So the schedule is today we're doing private networks and in-network roaming with Dean Parsons from NetNumber. Next Friday will be quantum computing with IBM with Gabe Chang. And then August 6th will be Zero Trust Solutions with the ProvNest platform with Jeff Hallett from Cloudocracy. Then later on, we're going to take a week break. And then on the 20th of August, we're going to do advancements in AI computing with JD. And then on the 27th of August, we're going to do blockchain integration using the IBM MQ bridge with Jeff Tenenbaum from IBM. And then finally on September 3rd, we'll do 3D GIS and the game engine evolution with yours truly. The registration is already open for quantum computing next week, and I'll get the registration links out for the rest of them here pretty soon. All right, for this webinar, if you have any questions, you have several options. You can hit the Q&A and post something, and I'll take a look at it and pass it on as it comes up. Or you can send us a chat, or you can raise your hand, and I can get to you and give you the ability to ask you the question yourself. All right. So then we're going to let it get started here with Dean and the NetNumbers technology.
Okay. Now, thank you very much, Bill. Now we're up and running. So typically, we would be talking about private networks in the context of actually providing coverage where there isn't any. But what we wanted to do with this presentation and session is really look at the security management and enhanced security that can be attained by using private networks. This is both looking at CONUS activity and also OCONUS activity. So actually, when potentially you have private networks operating within a hostile environment. So I think there are a number of things that we initially consider when we look at the traditional mobile network operators and how they operate their networks and the vulnerabilities within those networks. On the diagram on the bottom left of the slide, you can see that there are a number of ways that bad actors can actually gain access to essentially the voice, the messaging, and also the data information on a mobile handset. And I think it's broadly understood that this is a potential security risk to people. And essentially, what happens is people either have to modify their behavior. To the extreme of that will be people not actually using a mobile device in a very sensitive environment. So that may be in one of the forts or so forth within the US. Or you have to have, if you like, highly resilient devices that are maybe slightly cumbersome to utilize. What we've done is looked at this in a slightly different way, and actually by providing a private network and enhancing the security within that network, we actually see that people can essentially work and use the tools that everyone has become used to utilizing within the workplace. But I think most importantly, actually adding to the security within that workspace, be that in an office environment or when people are traveling, with things like sensor networks, mobile device tracking, whitelists and blacklists, so that bad actors can be picked up very, very easily. And really essentially focusing on the link between the CONUS head office and people working remotely, and making sure that that exchange of information, be that voice, messaging, or data, is as protected as much as it possibly can be. The way we do this, and that's certainly the approach that NetNumber have taken, is really to take the mobile network and put that in under the control of the government agency or the military that are essentially wish their users to operate within. So they can set things like policy. They can also set the firewalls between different departments. So essentially, you can create individual workspaces, but then maybe in a time of emergency, you can open the network up. So for example, if you had a situation where you had to, you wanted to invoke a silent evacuation on a campus, for example, this is a very good way of doing it. Obviously, if people haven't got access to their mobile phones, this type of activity becomes very, very problematic and also counterproductive in the workspace. The other thing that I think is clear here, actually operating your own private network, or in fact your own mobile network, is typically in the realms of the mobile operators themselves. You know, many highly skilled radio engineers and systems engineers would normally be required. What we've done at NetNumber is actually demystified the whole process of managing and maintaining a mobile network, be that as we have provided to the DoD over the last 12 years. We started with 2G networks, then went through 3G, LTE, and now we're releasing 5G networks into the wild, so to speak. Our whole philosophy with this has been to really make it as simple as possible for the agency or government body to actually maintain and manage the mobile network. So simple interfaces. Everything is driven through intuitive web management, and it's making the software highly portable, so it can be provided on hardware that's suitable for the environment that it's being placed into. So in a head office, for example, that would sit on a server environment, potentially for a VIP solution where you have people traveling overseas, small groups of people. You may actually just want to take a briefcase essentially with your own private network within it, so that people can interact with each other in the remote workspace, but also most importantly, they can communicate backwards and forwards to a head office, typically located in the US or somewhere that's deemed to be a secure environment. As I said, we have been providing for the last 12 years intergenerational mobile networks, initially starting with 2G and 3G. 4G has really been the mainstay for the last 6 or 7 years. And now with the advent of 5G, these networks are starting to be released to our customers. On top of this, so that people can actually modify the way that the network operates, we offer a very powerful API, which means that it can be linked into different systems. Again, you know, for things like policy management, actually setting firewalls between different departments and so forth as required, or actually enhancing the solution with applications that can be used by field operatives, for example. The solution is incredibly scalable. It's cost effective at a very low number of users, literally just a few users working remotely, and it's scalable to many thousands of users. So it's the same software and essentially the same interfaces that can be used across the breadth of the different applications. And most importantly, I think this is really looking at our system integrators and our partners. Typically, we white label our solutions. So you very often won't find NetNumber out there. Certainly, our name is certainly not promoted in the intelligence market, where we spend a good deal of time. So everything is provided for, as I say, system integrators and partners to take things forward. The screen shows an example of the, if you like, very, very simple interface that we provide for our NetCore LTE system. This was predominantly focused at a level within the DoD, which was a CW4, or Chief Warrant Officer 4. So this was someone that was seen to have a reasonable level of IT skills. I think in the times when we were providing, if you like, the initial networks, he was the guy that would climb up on the roof and line up the BGAN and provide everyone with IT infrastructure within the team. We've taken that skill set and we've made it manageable for CW4 to essentially run an entire mobile network. So again, it's about this simplifying, demystifying something that was typically incredibly complex and putting that into a form factor that made sense for people working in a tactical environment, for example.
Hey, Dean, I got a question.
Okay, please.
So you're talking about, you mentioned like a suitcase. Is that literally the size of the mobile network? So
correct.
So
yes.
a person or a group would get your solution. You'd get the suitcase of comms equipment, take it to wherever you want to be, and you stand up, just like you're talking about having the guy on the roof. And then anybody that has a cell phone or mobile device that knows the frequency and has the security connections can then connect to it, right?
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Okay.
And it goes a little bit further than that. We've actually deployed these on drones, so UAVs. So the smallest form factor we got down to was, it was 15 inches by 10 by 5 and weighed less than 5 pounds. So that was the, if you like, the environment that was probably toughest for us to work in. But typically these are, these considered a small Pelican case or a briefcase or actually a diplomatic bag. So it's those sorts of remote working environments that this actually does very well in.
And what's the range on a suitcase?
Okay, well, it depends on the radio and the amplifier that we put in there. But we actually did a solution for the Florida National Guard. It was 88 of these portable units. In those, they came with lithium ion batteries. So they weighed a little bit more. They were about 25 pounds. And they gave up to 6 miles in radius of coverage. So it can be actually very broad coverage. Or if you want to shrink it down, so if it's inside maybe the confines of an embassy or a remote office, so that, again, people on the outside haven't got access to that network, that can be done as well. So it's really just about understanding the situation and the environment you wish to deploy in.
Because the one use case that popped up in my mind was the NSA police here have been looking for a while on how to deploy their own secured private mobile network. and the range is for a couple miles, maybe not 6 miles, but I mean that could be an interesting.
Yes, certainly, and I think the key thing with deploying something like that across campus, for example, is that you get to control policy. So you provide, whereas a mobile operator is really just interested in one thing, and that's ARPU, so the average revenue per user. So they don't really care too much about security and policy. But if you run your own network, what you're able to do is provide individual class of service on a mobile by mobile basis. Who can call who, for example, whether you're giving them voice services, messaging services, or data services. So all of these things can be managed down to an individual basis, which is when you're setting up a campus environment and it's a sensitive and highly secure environment, clearly this is something that becomes interesting.
Yeah, and can you, if you had your own mobile device, so let's say you have a network set up and you have just your internal group's devices all configured to connect to it, can you take a personal device, like if I have my cell phone with me, is there a way to install things on it so that it can use that same secure network?
Yeah, we'll get into that in a couple of slides, but the answer to that is yes. But again, we provide security with whitelists and blacklists. Yeah, I'll explain how that works in a moment. We're a couple of slides in.
Okay.
But thank you.
I'll be quiet for a bit.
No, you're fine. Okay, we've discussed this just briefly, but essentially what we're providing is the same software that can run on almost a laptop single board computer. It could be in the back of in a backpack or a Pelican case, and also it can reside on a server in a head office. So the key thing with this is, for the people that are actually managing it, it's one set of software that just gets replicated throughout the network environment, making the management of that far easier. It's very flexible in the way that it can be deployed. As we've talked about, it can be in buildings, so a head office. It could be in vehicle. We've put this on aircraft, so it's been on a number of military aircraft, and we currently have a number of projects with the US Air Force. So actually, effectively lighting up the runway, so people can gain information in real time, and obviously maritime, and that's also for US Navy, but also commercial endeavors as well. And the key thing here is, because it's a portable network, because you can take it with you, you can literally take it anywhere, be that in the mountains, the desert, or a disaster situation. I mean, that's really why the Florida National Guard went for this. They have 88 of these systems literally sit on the coast, and when a hurricane rolls into town and takes out the cell towers, it means they've still got connectivity, which is absolutely critical for them.
Hey, Dean, it looks like Todd had 2 questions here.
Okay, please.
One of them is, can the private network include Wi-Fi, or is it just cellular?
We provide we focus on the cellular side of this, but we have a number of our partners and system integrators that actually put the 2 things side by side. What we would say is that typically the mobile network, really from 3G onwards, is a highly secure environment compared with Wi-Fi. But Wi-Fi offload is something that obviously can be utilized.
Yeah, I think he was thinking about, what if you have a situation where you have people inside the buildings, but your case or whatever it is outside the building, so it covers the area. Is there a way to pump that same network inside the building?
Yes, we have done that actually with mesh radio. So taking it a little bit further than Wi-Fi, use mesh radio to achieve that in much the same way as as you would if you want to go over the ridge, for example. So yes, that can be utilized in the same way.
Cool. All right. His other question was, what's the power requirement of the suitcase?
Okay. Well, we're actually the software provider, so we work with partners to actually put the suitcase together. Many years ago, actually, for the when we started with the Florida National Guard, we were actually building the cases. So we took a mil-spec lithium-ion battery and actually built that into the case, so it's hot swappable, and so forth. The power requirement for this is actually very low, because all you essentially have is a single board computer, a small router, and a radio. And really the only thing that consumes power is the radio, dependent on how far you want to push the signal. So if it's just, for example, inside the confines of say a building, or as we've deployed an embassy, the radios only dissipate 200 milliwatts. So the power requirement here is actually very, very low. And you know, we discussed the putting this on a UAV. You know, that was something that was a must-have, was a low power requirement. So it really comes down to single board computer, a small router, and a radio.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay. So to answer your question, Bill, we found very early on, when we were providing people within the DoD with private networks, that there was some resistance to the private network, purely because people had to use maybe a different handset, or they had to use a dual SIM handset. So effectively one SIM for the traditional operator, so AT&T, Verizon, and one for the internal network. And there was one very senior gentleman had a conversation with me, and his view of this was, and his words were, "I just want my phone to work normally. Like, you guys will do really well if you can just crack that one." So we went away and we looked at various ways of achieving this, and you know, everything that was available in the market was a little bit clunky, made it very difficult for people to get into the mobile network. Someone had to sit there and program things for them. And the way we do this is we went away and we actually secured 1,500 roaming agreements. So we cover 99% of the operators on the planet. And what we do is we treat the private network in much the same way as you would move or essentially roam from, say, France to Germany, or from the US to Mexico. So we use that essentially same technology that the mobile operators use, but we actually do that between the private network and the public network, or the MNO environment. What this means is the user experience is there isn't one. So people essentially can move from the macro network into the private network. Now, you know, that overcomes many issues around usability. You protect yourself from a security perspective with whitelists and blacklists. So the whitelists enable people to come on. Blacklists might be, okay, we have our regular users, our employees. If we see a mobile device turn up that's not supposed to be here, then that can raise an alert. So it works in the same way as geofencing or sensor networks, for example. So this is something that becomes, if you like, very, very usable, but also highly secure in the way that it's managed.
Yeah, because I mean, all that, one of the things they keep trying to do here is just like the other guy you were talking about, just wanting his cell phone to work. You know, they want to be able to have their cell phone on them all the time, but they want to be able to go from the public networks to the secure networks, so they can use their own device or use any device, you know, and work with it from wherever they're at on whichever level of classification network they need to work on. So I mean, it sounds like this would fit that very well.
Yes, and the other thing is once the networks then, once the mobile device is then registered to the network, then as we discussed before, the policy and the control through class of service, for example, and then over-the-top applications. So you might actually say, right, no one gets to use voice within the environment or messaging. What we want to do is we want to secure that with another application, so essentially a voice application or a messaging application that sits beyond that with its own level of encryption and security. The benefit of that being is if you own the infrastructure, so the mobile network is essentially just a foundation which gives you throughput. And then what happens is you actually layer applications on the devices on that, just utilizing that bandwidth to communicate with each other, but in a highly secure manner. So you own the environment and you also then secure the mobile device. And it then becomes highly resilient. I wouldn't say it's impossible to get into, but you're putting significant hurdles in the way of any bad actor in that environment.
Right. Is there a way to get really granular? Like, let's make sure that nobody ever posts to their Facebook page from within the fence boundary.
Absolutely. So what happens is essentially you're taking the IP feed. So a mobile device, a mobile handset has its own MAC address, IP address, and we know who that person is, okay, because they're already pre-registered. And all of the data traffic that comes from the mobile device comes into the mobile network and then goes out, essentially, comes across the border onto a firewall that's managed by the controlling party in the environment. So you talked about the NSA, so it's a firewall that's controlled by the NSA. And they can choose, they can basically set their own policy on that firewall to determine what anyone's mobile device is allowed to do, and also have a point for monitoring as well. So this is, essentially every piece of data that comes from a device would come through that firewall and then could be analyzed accordingly.
Cool.
Okay. Okay. The next diagram. So I realise we're going slightly over, but the next diagram looks at, if you like, the whole infrastructure of the headquarters and essentially someone working remotely, or maybe you have a remote, in this scenario, an embassy in a hostile environment. So what we do is we have our own private network within the offices, which are CONUS, and then you have your embassy with its own private network, which is a CONUS in a hostile environment where you don't trust the local mobile operator. But you want people to be able to use their mobile devices. So essentially what we're doing is setting a VPN up between the head office and the remote network, and people are able to use their mobile devices in the way that we just talked about remotely, but in a highly secure manner. So that essentially that data stream is held in the private network. It's then routed via VPN, and then will go to the head office. Also, on the left-hand side of the diagram, this is where we actually build in the ability to bring in the in-roaming and essentially mobile operators, so that any device that the embassy staff are using, so bring your own device, can register to the embassy environment. Also, as we discussed, through the whitelists and blacklists, okay, who's in my embassy? I want, I really want to know. And clearly with this sort of infrastructure, we can't go into this on this call in any detail, but having the ability to bring a mobile device into a network without that mobile device realizing is incredibly powerful from an intel and surveillance perspective. Like I say, we have a raft of information on that, but it's not something that we're going to deal with on this webinar. Okay. And if we look at this from a perspective of having multiple mobile networks, which are essentially firewalled, or you may have multiple networks within a campus environment that are individually firewalled, but managed by the essentially controlling organization within that environment. And then you may have remote networks that people take with them. So the VIP networks that are mobile, sit in a briefcase or a pelly case. And then you can have essentially, remote offices or so forth, all sit in a common infrastructure with a common management interface and also policy control. So what you end up with is an ecosystem that works for the controlling organization, rather than people, as I think has happened historically. They go off and do their own thing. They put in a small bubble of coverage that doesn't actually interwork with anyone else, and certainly is not governed by the policy of the controlling organization. So in one example was that we used earlier was the NSA. So this might be something that is interesting within that environment, where you enable people to have their own workspace and make that workspace secure. But in times of an emergency situation that we talked about, it is possible to actually broadcast messages or broadcast voice calls to, if you like, all of the individuals within an environment. So this is something we see is happening more and more, where the organizations have come to realize having lots and lots of disparate networks are really not in the interest of the controlling organization, because you just have multiple things to manage, have a huge management overhead, and they just don't interwork with each other in an effective manner.
Hey, Dean. You just said that you could broadcast a message to people in the environment. Can you go kind of outside or in reverse to the roaming? So since you have roaming, of course you got your own device, you can go inside. But can you broadcast a message from your secure network that goes out to the other phones and devices if they're outside the range of the secured private network?
It is possible to do that, purely because we have our own SMSC, so we have our own SMS messaging center, and yes, we have the ability to do that. We do in disaster situations, we do wide scale broadcast, both on the ground. So you actually this is from the private network, but also to people which are within the effectively the general location. So yes, those sorts of things are readily achievable.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, and I think this is probably what you guys were thinking of originally, is just as a COOP, continuity of operations, backup communications. Like, as you say, in a disaster, all the comms go down in the area. The agency here has a whole bunch of policies and procedures on what you do in that situation, and all the backup locations where people are supposed to go to work, but they still need the comms. So if you
That's
had
absolutely, yeah.
Right. So if you had a couple of these, just like I guess with the National Guard, you have a couple of these laying around in case that type of situation comes up.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, our whole first responder and disaster systems came out of I'd like to say it was my idea, but it wasn't. It actually came out the guys that were involved in Katrina. They said, there were two things in Katrina. Clearly, it was very, very sad. There was loss of life, but most people that actually perished in Katrina actually perished with a mobile phone by the side of them. And the problem was the cell towers had been taken out either by flood water or by the storm itself.
Right.
And the only thing that was available to them at the time was something from AT&T, which was called the COW, the cell on wheels, which was basically an 18-wheeler truck with a cell tower on it. Now, when you have 6 feet of water because of the levees have been breached, then an 18-wheeler truck's not a lot of use to you. So what they wanted to do was actually have something that was man-portable, under 55 pounds, that they could stick in a transport, typically a helicopter, and then fly into disaster situations, and then broadcast SMS to people. So if you're in trouble, tell us. There's food here, there's water here, please go to safety. They were using, I think, the idea was to use the football grounds and playing fields and things like that were in safe locations. So that's where a lot of this technology came from. And that was really, if you like, we put a high degree of focus into that when we started the business 12 years ago.
Right. Being a geospatial guy, you start talking about all that, and the first thing I want to do is start building maps off of it.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
So thank you very much for everyone making the time. And if there are any questions, I'm more than happy to run through them now.
Okay. If anybody does have a question, I want you to raise your hand, and then I can give you the ability to speak if you wish. Again, or you can post it to the question and answer section, or send us a chat. We'll leave the line open here for a minute or two and see if we get any more questions before we wrap things up. As we're waiting for that, Dean, or Brad, have you guys talked at all with the NSA police and security about your technology?
We have not talked to the police yet. We are in the first stages of trying to gain access to different areas within the fort, as you well know.
Right.
We're presenting in a networking environment, but we're just making those first strides toward getting to individual groups. Have been referred into Y4, but nobody in particular yet. We've talked with a couple of the larger systems integrators about putting this technology forward, and they've been accepting. It's just a question of you're still dealing with a large system integrator.
Yeah.
We have not had the ability to get the direct contact inside, other than through the small business office and their access.
Well, then this recording of the webinar is going to be great, because then I can pass it off onto our facilities and security contacts.
Absolutely.
Here at the agency, because I think this has a lot of applicability, and I know that they've been working on this, trying to come up with a good solution for the last couple years, and I know they haven't quite solved it yet. So,
to be honest with you, I had not even thought about the uniformed police group up there, which is my mistake. My efforts have been concentrated on the fact that for as many years as I've been dealing with the fort, everybody's been screaming about not being able to take a mobile phone inside.
Yeah, there has been that. And then the next one you'll get are all the mission applications.
Right.
All right. And then down the list a little bit, you'll come across the uniformed police.
Yeah, it's just been one opportunity after another, and we're, which is one of the reasons we're pursuing PISA, is to have better access.
And then we talked a little bit about the IA applications. Do either one of you want to speak more directly to that? So when I pass this off to the government, they hear it?
Yeah, I think the clear thing here with information assurance is really the idea that you're providing a multi-layered approach to the protection and security of anything that's on any mobile device. Essentially, you have a secure foundation or a secure transport layer that you're utilizing, be that within LTE, so 4G or 5G, and then you have a multi-layered approach of essentially VPNs, your own firewalls, then over-the-top applications to secure things further. So from an IA perspective, I think if you accept the fact that people want to use their mobile devices, and this is something of value, then what we're doing is providing the most secure environment for them to do that in.
And I would think too, for this particular agency, being able to give them complete control over the policies and the hardware, the infrastructure part of it is also going to be important.
Certainly, yes, yeah. I think it almost, the agency is clearly a very interesting opportunity. But if you look at this, even in the outside world of finance, for example, or mining or gas exploration, all of the information is highly valuable, and it's really about everyone wanting to maintain the security around everything they do within their mobile device environment.
So how would it apply to finance?
Well, finance is interesting. It comes down to people actually essentially wanting to trade remotely. So if you look at what we've all just been through with COVID, people essentially had to work in remote locations, and the actual physical element of trading, or the interaction between people, was typically done on a mobile device. Now that's something that is effectively out in the open if it's on a traditional mobile operator's network. So yes, this is just about building layers of security around that.
It's interesting. That made me think of a gentleman I was talking to a couple years back who was working in, I think it was various parts of Africa, in trying to get the education grants and reimbursements to the people that had applied for them, but they did it all over mobile networks. And the criminals had gotten to the point where they could figure out how to hijack it.
Yep.
All right. So it sounds to me like this would be another one of those applications. If this type of network was available to them there, then they could do it in a secure manner.
Well, if you think about the mining community in South America, especially, and the remote locations where there 9 times out of 10 there isn't any cell service or whatever, and the amount of money that runs through those mining operations on a daily basis, the idea of secure communications is one of the most important things they consider. And to the point where you hand somebody a note and tell them to run with it down the street to deliver it, versus having a private network to be able to communicate securely.
Right. Well, this is all very cool stuff. I'm glad you guys had the time to give this presentation to us today. I have not seen anybody raise their hand, so I'm going to guess nobody has any questions, besides the billions that I have running through my head. But we can discuss those over email or something times later.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you again very much for taking the time and showing us what you have to show us with this technology. For everybody else, thanks for showing up. Thanks for coming in. The video will be available probably by Monday or Tuesday. I will get it posted to our YouTube channel. Please feel free to disseminate it to anybody you want. you know, and they can all view it as well. All right, thanks, guys.
All
Thank you.
right, have a good day.
Yep, everybody take care.